A cruiser can harden an aircraft carrier. Can you believe it? This is the most powerful cruiser in Russia. Has a domineering name. In the name of the Earth, frighten the West. He's the last pinnacle of the Soviet Union, known as the moving sea dance. It's firepower, more than he should have been. This is the post-Peter the Great nuclear cruiser. So how strong is his combat power? Why did the fighting nation build him? How did Russia use him? After World War II, the two superpowers are competing for world hegemony, launched a protracted arms race against Japan to counter the US Navy's aircraft carriers. The Soviet Union carried out a large-scale refit of its strategic ships. It turned out to be all 4 guns. So, the already weak Soviet Navy, I can't beat the US Navy. What do you do? So they came up with a good idea. Since it cannot compete with the United States in aircraft carriers, then spend your time on the thrill ship. Just put the aircraft carrier kicking on the opposite side. And this proposal, he also received great support from Brezhnev. The great Soviet leader thought to himself, or create one that is enough to crush all. Row of battleships. That's it, Type 114 nuclear-powered cruiser, finally included in the planned production line. At the same time, Brezhnev also personally instructed, directly conduct cross-generation research and development of aircraft carrier, No. 1143. Early, the Soviet Union built its first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the famous Ulyanovsk. And Line 1144 Kirov and nuclear-powered cruisers. My original job was to fight against American submarines. Then it was changed to Uriano, the frigates of the VSK and the aircraft carrier. But here's the thing, whether it is a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier or the 4th nuclear-powered cruiser, Peter the Great was pushed into trouble by various departments. Until the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. It's not even finished yet. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Ulyanovsk, the aircraft carrier was inherited by its second son, Ukraine. After Peter the Great, Youngjan was succeeded by his eldest son, Russia. Due to the large gap between the two countries, Ukraine can only transfer the aircraft carrier that is already 40% complete. Take it apart. It was sold to a recycling company established for this purpose in the United States, after the Russians took over in the cruisers. Keep retrofitting? Completed and launched in 1996. Russia at this time. They no longer have the financial resources to build and maintain aircraft carriers. Even if you want to use the Peter the Great as a frigate, there are no aircraft carriers to form a formation. Therefore, let's just use Peter the Great as our flagship. Officially enlisted in the Army in 1996. Served in the Northern Fleet. The reason why I took the name Great Emperor, just because of Peter the Great. To Russian history, one of the only 2 rulers known as the Great Emperor. He introduced military modernization reforms, increased the Russian military strategy significantly. It can be said that the moral is quite auspicious. The cruiser is 252 meters long, 28.5 meters wide. Such a massive stature and terrifying tonnage. A real shock. Number. The cruiser Peter the Great called a hard steel aircraft carrier. How scary is it to stand? First of all, to be strong, you have to run fast and long. In terms of motivation, Peter the Great mainly uses 2. KH-3 type pressurized water box. Reactor. Just the power provided by this reactor. That's enough to make it travel at a full speed of 32 knots for a long time. Or cruise indefinitely at 20 knots. And not only that, in response to emergencies, Russia is still after Peter the Great. 2 kVg, 2 oil-fired steam boilers were installed. Even the conventional power provided by the boiler. It is also possible to make Peter the Great meet after 14 verses. Approaching nucleus, half the force. In addition, the fighting nation also added 2 steam turbines to him. Let this cruiser directly It has 6 hearts. Therefore, even if a powertrain fails, the other 2 sets are also capable of switching propulsion modes immediately. It's foolproof. Maybe someone will say, Peter the Great is only 32 verses old. Not particularly fast on a cruiser. And that's where we have to start. Another argument after Peter the Great: tonnage. According to the original construction plan, Soviet leaders who liked big weapons, Brezhnev, auctionite will Kim Ruffin, full load displacement of Hikuyang, loaded 24,300 tons. And when the 4th ship was built after Peter the Great, the full displacement has reached 25,860 tons. Even the standard displacement is 23,750 tons. What is this concept? The average cruiser in the world today. Full load displacement is generally 10,000 tons. Some American cruisers, not even 10,000. Peter the Great had more than twice as many. It's no exaggeration to say, after Peter the Great, a nuclear cruiser styled in the 1980s. Tonnage and performance completely crush cruisers of the same class. It can even fight some aircraft carriers. In fact, after Peter the Great, before and after, there are also 3 Kirov and nuclear-powered cruisers. If their fate, not as good as after Peter the Great. One of the first to be built, the Kirov, after Admiral Yusakov. It was used as a parts bank after the collapse of the Soviet Union for dismantling and maintenance. Other appraisals will be completed by 2021. The second born, the Admiral Azav. The situation is better than the first one, after 30 years in a houseboat. Also completely dismantled in 2021. And the third, Kalinin. In the case of the Admiral Nasimov, even worse. Due to a sudden nuclear reactor accident, the cruiser has been mothballed in the shipyard. Perform repairs and modernizations. I don't know when it will be successfully completed. And the 5th gill driver. That's the Kuznetsov. The Soviet Navy was in the worst situation. Due to technical and financial reasons, the construction of the ship was repeatedly delayed and eventually abandoned. Therefore, the 4th surviving Kirov after Peter the Great. So far, the largest in human history. And finally, a nuclear cruiser. Weapons mounted on a cruiser. It can directly counter an aircraft carrier formation. Can you believe that? The Russian cruiser Peter the Great said, "We can do it first, we need to understand." As the largest and final cruiser ever built. After Peter the Great, whether it is air defense or anti-submarine, or the attack ability can be perfectly competent. And Peter the Great could have such a powerful ability. Mainly relies on the P-70 Granite missile. Granite missile? It was made in the 1970s. The developed cruise missile, as huge as the Peter the Great, and an incredible amount of charge, unable to multiply its power. Enough to destroy large ships, including aircraft carriers. At the same time, this type of missile also has a turbojet engine. This exclusive technology make it fly far faster than missiles of the same class. Before someone else attacks, fire 2 missiles in a salvo within 20 seconds. And not only that, according to the data, this is a multimedia missile. The first one to be fired will serve as a pilot missile. Search for targets and return guided missiles. And what scares the enemy the most is P-700 Granite missile, in addition to the above-mentioned anti-key version. There are also air defense and counterattack models. You could say, the missile can do it almost on its own. All fire protection work on ships. But a fighting nation that has always believed in the academic superiority of firepower, not satisfied. To strengthen the firepower of Peter the Great, make it into a movable sea dance library. They also added extra air defense to it. Anti-submarine weapon. One of the anti-aircraft weapons uses gargoyles, fleet air missile system, and the AK-630 entry gun. Gargoyle air defense missile. It is Russia's top missile system. The tombstone that matches the assembly rotates on one side. Phased array radar. Enough to intercept ballistic missiles and high-altitude missiles. High-speed bomber. And the AK-630 enters the anti-gun. It is the world's first anti-entry weapon system. Has a rate of fire of up to 3,000 rounds per minute and an anti-counterfeiting distance of nearly 4 kilometers. Our country has also introduced this high-performance weapon, and on this basis, the world-famous 10,000 gun was transformed, and in terms of redeployment, added after Peter the Great. It's a King Snake anti-submarine rocket launcher. The weapon has 10 combined launch tubes, capable of launching a saturated burst of firepower while bombarding enemy submarines. It also has a torpedo blocking rate of over 90%. Actually, as the current flagship of the Russian Northern Fleet, there's no other cruise on the planet. Ship. Not only the more common conventionally powered cruisers, it's not as powerful as the Peter the Great. Even the US nuclear cruisers of the same class are not as good as. Whether it is the world's first nuclear-powered ship, surface ship, the sagging nuclear missile cruiser USS Long Beach in 1959, the last nuclear cruiser in the US Navy, Akin, who served in the 1980s, USS Color nuclear cruiser, both are in tonnage, sugar plastic firepower and protection. Can compare to the Peter the Great, and the powerful firepower brought by nearly 500 missiles, plus advanced fire control systems, let Peter the Great have the attack. Comprehensive combat capability of multi-component defense. So in the vast sea, if Western warships fought a cruiser, they dare not take it lightly, because that's very likely. It was the last nuclear-powered cruiser in history. And despite that, he only had one. He alone is a naval formation. Even the aircraft carrier battle group has to avoid 3 points when they see him. Not to mention other ships. After all, a legacy of the Soviet era. One less arrow with one arrow. Peter the Great is known as the Five Arrows, and the pinnacle of the Soviet Navy definitely lives up to its reputation.